Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Renify Mindshare interview. My name is Steve Sampson. I'm the video producer for Renify, and I'm here with Dr. Ann Schiebert, a psychologist who specializes in a lot of different things, but mainly, and our focus today is going to be on healthy relationships. And specifically, we're going to be talking about healthy relationships and how that comes into play when it comes to money and personal finance and that sort of thing. So, Ann, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm so happy to be here, and money is a big deal between couples, and how to mediate money agreements is an important thing that most people don't talk about. So I'm really interested in this topic.
Well, I hope that we'll make it as interesting for you as you will for us. I was fascinated by your seminar just this past Saturday, and there's one concept in particular. We'll get into it a little bit later, but first I want to talk about, why people get in unhealthy relationships, why we stay in unhealthy relationships. Can you share a little bit of insight with us on that?
That's such a wonderful question that I love, actually. We do tend to stay in unhealthy relationships. So there's a fear of change. People hate change. So at least I am with the devil I know, and the idea of having a different kind of opportunity or an opportunity at all can be very scary. And then sometimes when we're in what I call the limerence stage, and we can explain that later, we just sort of merge into living together without much conversation, thinking that, this is such a perfect relationship, nothing can go wrong. But how well do you know the person that you've decided to move in with? And in that regard, there's very little mention of budgeting. What are your beliefs about finances? What are your beliefs about child rearing and how we pay for our child? And what are your values? So if my value, for example, is going to Nordstrom's and spending $5,000 every day, and I'm with somebody who would never even dream of doing that, that is going to be a constant source of irritation, nagging, and defensiveness in the relationship.
Well, I'm totally with you on that, and I'm thinking of a past relationship of my own, and it wasn't as extreme, and I know that the example you gave was deliberately extreme, $5,000
Yes.
a day. But you're right, we were deeply in love, and so we just didn't, I think we didn't want to come out of that high, that beautiful cloud, to talk about the nuts and bolts part of a relationship. And I get that we still would have been viewing it everything through rose-colored glasses, but at least I know we should have talked about the sort of left brain rational stuff to see is there a big red flag that pops up that we have to address, hand in hand with roses and all that sort of thing, but still that we had to address, rather than just, we love each other enough and love conquers all, blah, blah, blah. Which we know isn't true in our heads, but in the moment.
But we want it to be true.
Exactly.
Chemical love for the first 6 months of oxytocin, PEA, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And boy, all those are like the huggy, rose color, you can do no wrong kind of chemicals. And we don't want to get into reality because the chemicals are like this high, this euphoria that who wants to come out of that? But the chemicals don't last forever. And then what you have decided or not decided, because it's really not conscious, what you haven't talked about then presents its ugly head, and all the differences come up. And then if it's a heterosexual couple, I become the naggy bitch, and you become the SOB who's disrespectful. And it goes downhill from there. And by the way, just in time to have a child.
Yeah.
And we've never discussed having a child because I just accidentally had a child. And the money it's going to take. And what are your thoughts about, do we send our child to college? Do we save? What if there's a lousy public high school? Do we have to send our child to a private school? So again, all those things aren't discussed because it's so chemically euphoric and I never want it to end.
Right. It's a downer, right? You're a buzzkill if you want to go there. And also, I think it does bring up the very unhealthy sort of conversational and relationship dynamic of, if you really loved me, or if you loved me enough, then you'd find a way to make the money part work, or that sort of thing.
So here's that formula, and I've never seen this work. So here it is. If you loved me enough, you'd change, and you'd abdicate all of your values because I am so important. And that in a relationship is unequal. It makes me up here and you down here because I'm so perfect and you have to change and abdicate your values. I've never seen that work in a happy relationship.
Yeah, I can't imagine it ever working. Not at all. So when it comes to money, which seems to be such a hot button issue, right? I mean, so many people have such strong feelings about money. And I know, like, we've talked to people about going to business with a friend and stuff like that, that everything's fine, even in a friendship, everything's fine. And the friends are enthusiastic. And I don't know if it's oxytocin or what, but the friends have this idea and they think this will be a great business. Let's go into business together.
Right.
And things are okay. But as soon as money like when there's no money, it's okay because we're in it together. But as soon as money starts to come in, then it becomes who gets how much and why and who did what percentage of work and all that sort of thing. So it seems to me from that scenario, the time to talk about money is before there is any coming in.
I have been in a business relationship like that in a previous career long ago in the Ice Age. And so it didn't work out because we didn't talk it out. We got the legal document and I thought it was equitable, but stuff comes up that we couldn't forecast. And then the other person, stole money from me. And so, boy, did that tank. And actually it was an impetus for me to get out of that occupation and into the one I'm in now. So this happens all the time because we can't foresee the future, especially with money or situations in a business transaction. And we want to trust our partner to think like we do, but we don't talk about their belief system about business or honesty.
What about, you sort of bring it back to couples, what are some ways for a couple to talk about anything, but specifically to talk about money, knowing that this might be a trigger? Is there a formula or a process that you recommend?
Well, I like I statements because here's the deal. If I say you are a spendthrift, you automatically get defensive and you don't want to talk to me. But if I address you like, I am having some issues with our budget and paying bills and feeling like I'm doing this all by myself in my made-up example. And are you willing to talk to me? This has to be done before you seal the deal in some way, because if this person is not willing to work out problems with me, life is not going to be fun. And I've signed up for it blindly or not so blindly.
It reminds me, and this might be exactly what you're talking about, and I'm just thinking of it differently, but the concept of nonviolent communication, the formula, I think it's great. It feels a little stiff because it's a formal sort of process, but I found that it works well for me, not always for the other person, but the idea of when this happens, I feel X. Would you be willing to Y? You know, whatever it is, just plugging it into that sort of formal I, and would you be willing to?
And that's a great script. And I like to soften it a little because it does sound very rehearsed and a little rigid.
Yeah.
So I might approach it like, you know, honey, I'm having some challenges with my money and my job. I'd really like to talk to you about budgeting and saving, and maybe we could divide up some of these financial jobs between us. Do you have any time to have that conversation with me?
So still starting with the I statements and expressing how you're feeling, not how they're making you feel, but how you're feeling, and then making the request.
Yeah, nobody can make me feel what I don't sign up to feel.
Got it.
For statement. So I can't blame you for how I feel because I own it.
Well, but it often does come up that way, that we start to, you know, I think we're disappointed that things aren't as rosy as they once were, and we blame the other person, and then resentment, all that sort of stuff. It starts a chain reaction.
It does, and I have so many patients who come to me with these problems. Like, you know, I didn't know that he didn't want to work. When I met him or her, he or she had a great job and they were paying their half, and now all he or she does is drink beer on the sofa, and I am furious. And now we have 2 kids and I am the sole provider. What do I do with that? Well, this is a whole reason why we're having this conversation, because I'm hoping that we can, you and I together, can mentor folks into how to approach relationships regarding finances. It's a critical point.
It is a critical point, and I think, you know, traditionally the roles have been, you know, the male provider and the female, you know, raising the kids. You know, going back my parents' generations, and
long ago,
and it's shifted a lot. I've talked to women, we've interviewed women who have been kind of the providers or the primary providers, and it's fantastic that in not enough, but in some cases, women are able to do that. You know, they're earning, they've got great careers, all that sort of thing. But I think there are a lot of people who, whether intentionally or not, fall into sort of the easy path. So if your partner, again, male or female, if your partner makes a lot more money than you do, it's easy to just let them shoulder that burden. What are some strategies that you can think of? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, because I'm just...
You can put me on the spot.
All right. So what are some strategies for that imbalanced financial relationship where, you know, the partner who makes less money can't help that they make less money, and they still want to contribute? But, you know, if one partner's a doctor making 400 grand a year, and the other's a school teacher making 60 grand a year.
On a good day.
On a good day, yeah, exactly. But how could they arrange something, have the conversation and arrange something so that they're both contributing in a meaningful way?
So here's what gets my goat, because I've been on both sides of this. I have been the stay-at-home mom who was devalued, and there wasn't a salary. It was like, oh, we really need some money for bus passes. And of course, we never had the financial discussion, but no value is put on all the work I did. And I will say the same thing for stay-at-home dads. No value is put on the work they do. And I think there's especially a stigma on stay-at-home dads, because it's like, oh, he couldn't get a job. So having been on both sides, I can tell you, going to work is a lot easier than staying home raising the kids. And I would rather go to work than stay home with my, then at that time, 3, 2, 4, and 6-year-olds, because I didn't get any intellectual stimulation unless I was with my girlfriends. So I think we have to reevaluate value and start respecting the contributions of our partners. And then I think also, if you're making $400,000 and I'm making 60 on a good day because I'm a school teacher and you're a physician, I think we have to sit down and really say what my job is worth, because I might be making $60,000 as a school teacher, but I also work at home correcting papers. I also get the dinner. I also make sure that our kids are gone on time and dressed and the wash is done. So to discount the labor that it takes behind the scenes, I think is really inequitable.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, you know, this isn't, you know, we're not forging a new path here. Everyone that I think just about anyone that you talk to will agree that there's value to raising the children. Clearly, there's got to be value to raising children.
Hardest job ever.
And the most important one, or, you know, arguably. But it's so, you know, somebody once told me, if this was regarding training, you know, a corporate training environment, they said, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter, as far as like assessments and things like that. And it's easy to measure money in the bank. It's easy to measure a paycheck. It's impossible to measure how little Johnny feels about himself because he had a problem at school or his homework was, you know. So yes, there has to be a conversation, clearly. The
other thing is, how much is a nanny worth? God, they make thousands of dollars a month. But I, as a stay-at-home mom, and with my patients who reported to me, I don't get that. I don't get valued like that. So if I'm a school teacher and I'm doing all the other jobs and I'm doing homework with my kids because, and I'll make up this, what I hear over and over, because the partner has had a hard day at work and they deserve to watch all the sports on TV, and I get to take care of the rest of the burden. That comes with a value that's not really valued.
Yeah. Well, now I want to be fair to the physicians, the high earners out there, because
I work with them. They're awesome.
Because it's not always, or maybe even often, the higher earner works and that's all they do. And the lower earner works and takes care of the kids, all that. What about a situation where, again, physician works, you know, 50, 60 hours a week? I understand they work hard. School teacher works 40 hours a week and comes home and works another 10 or 20. So they're both working the same number of hours, and they both are contributing in their own ways. Sometimes it's easy to not see the way the other person contributes. But the money is such a discrepancy. Is it fair to say, like, high earner, I'll pay the mortgage and I'll pay the utilities, like I'll take care of all the house expenses and you take care of all the car expenses. You make the car payments, yes, because that's it's relative to their income.
Or I think it's about an attitude toward contribution. So I'll make up something. So the stay-at-home dad, honey, you know what? I have to pay thousands of dollars a month, maybe $3,000 a month, I'll make that up, to have somebody come in and do what you do. And I cannot thank you enough for your contribution. Oh my God, because I love my job and one of us has to be making more money. If I have that attitude, the other person feels appreciated. Whereas you're making $400,000 in your example, and I'm working and not contributing financially, but the attitude toward my contribution is what makes a relationship. How many folks say, you know, I value you so much for raising the kids and dealing with their homework every night, which would make me crazy.
Yep.
I don't hear that conversation. Of course, I only really see people who have problems, but these are the generalized problems that come through my door when it has to do with relationships. So how do we get back on track? We have to say thank you. We have to say we have to acknowledge the contributions and what's going on. We have to kind of really get together and have that negotiation, and so many couples don't know how to negotiate. That negotiation about where does the money go? Who pays the bills? Who pays the mortgage? What happens if an accident happens to the car? Who pays for that? What if your accident causes the insurance payment to go up? All kinds of things that, if they're not discussed, they turn out to be resentments and grudges, and that negatively affects the relationship.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned just saying thank you, and it occurs to me, in fact, during your seminar, I wrote down this note to myself that we teach our kids to say please and thank you and you're welcome.
Yes.
And there's the parent out there that isn't proud of their child and of themselves when they hear their child say please and thank you and you're welcome. And yet we forget to do that to each other, to express
What's
gratitude.
that about? What do you think that's about? I guess I could answer the question. I think it's about taking the other person for granted and sinking into the, okay, this is normal, as opposed to this is a person I really get to value, that I am so honored to have you in my life. And I honestly, I can speak personally, I feel that way about my husband. I'm so honored that he chose me and I chose him. He's honored too. So we have that mutual thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's easy for us to get caught up in our own stuff. Like, I do this, I work so hard, it's the least they can do to wash the dishes. Or I make dinner.
You owe me.
Yeah, there I think is this thing of mentally, sometimes we keep a tally in our head of who did what. And of course, we see and we value every single thing we do, and we don't see, and sometimes we don't value the things they do. So it's always going to be off balance. It's always going to be inaccurate.
If you're keeping score,
yeah,
then it will be. But here's the other thing. What is there anything I could do today that would make your life easier? Who asks that? The first time I asked that to my husband, I thought he'd faint. He went, wow, yeah, you know, I'm supposed to be weeding the garden today. Could you come out and help me? We put some music on. We had a great time. I made his life easier. He made the garden's life easier because he took all the weeds out. And he's a better weeder than I. So we have to again, negotiate this, and we have to acknowledge how we can, or offer how we can help to make the other person's life easier. That's such a great question.
Yeah, that is that.
If we make it all about us and our contributions, and we are so self-focused, it's not really a relationship. It's two individuals living together, wondering why they're not getting along.
Yeah.
Especially about money.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another thing I wanted to ask you about was from your seminar. Relationships never exist in a vacuum. And a lot of the times when one person isn't happy in their relationship, there's someone that they go to, you know, best friend, something like that, they go to, that they talk to, or a parent, and then it just creates a vicious cycle. And I think you called it the drama triangle when you were.
Yes, and that's not my original thing. That comes from Dr. Steve Cartman. But the drama triangle goes, there's a persecutor, the complainer, then there's a victim, the person who I'm complaining about, and then there's the third party, usually an outside. So that would be like a parent or a girlfriend. So it's not about problem solving, it's about dysfunctional relationships. So I get persecuted, I become the victim, my feelings are hurt, so I call my mom. Now, that is a relationship breaker if there ever was one. Because if I have a good mom and she loves me, she's going to hate the person over time, or maybe the first time, who did that to her poor daughter. So I have triangulated, was what it's called, the relationship by bringing in a third party to rescue my feelings. And there's no problem solving. Like, okay, here's the issue between us. How can we solve this problem? And I gave the example of a patient I used to have where, during the seminar, I gave this example where the wife thought she was going to die every time her husband was behind the wheel. And he thought he was going to die when she was driving. So that was like, oh my God, what do we do with this? We can't ever go in the same car together. They worked it out. And I kiddingly said, the husband said, okay, you drive and I'll put a paper bag over my head. But that's not really how it worked out. He thought, wow, you drive, I'm going to focus on my computer. And that's what happened. And now she drives, he gets work done, and they go places together. But, you know, this patient could have called her mom and said, oh my God, I need to hire a chauffeur, which we don't have money for, because I'm so scared of how so-and-so is driving. And then I'll make up a story. So mom would then tell the dad, and the dad and the mom would talk about how horrible this is. Where did this person learn how to drive? And that would be the gossip in the family. Terrible relationship breaker, big red flag. And we get to have conversations about what we discuss that's between us with outside people.
Yep.
Yep. Now, women like to have intimate girlfriends. And the intimate girlfriends they turn to, they suspect they know the answers to their problem. But this is an emotional response from the girlfriend, and I would like to know the credentials of the girlfriend in problem solving in that area, because I can get all kinds of bad advice. And then I might go to my accountant when it has to do with money and then get some really knowledgeable advice.
Yeah, I have recent experience with this particular dynamic. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, is there, you know, and it didn't work out clearly, but was there a way for me to, could I have done a course correction? You know, it wasn't me who was doing the talking, but what could I have done to try to bring it back? Because it seems like, well, it doesn't seem like, I'd be fictionalizing a true account, but you know, if there's legitimate frustration with me, because I do have irritating qualities, if there's a legitimate frustration with me and she goes and talks to her mother, and then her mother talks to her sisters, and then they're all talking to her,
you're done.
Yeah. So, you know, I think it would have been great if I had seen it earlier, and after it started, to have a conversation to say, you know, we need to solve this ourselves. I'm not keeping you from your mom, you know, talk to her, but it isn't working. I imagine my mom has passed, so it's easy for me to, you know, paint her as the perfect mom, which I know she wasn't. But I can imagine, I can hear my mom's voice. If I had gone to her and talked to her about, you know, complained, I can imagine her saying, honey, I love you, and that's got to be frustrating, but you need to talk to her, because, you know, this is not, there's something dangerous or unhealthy and, you know, I need to warn you or protect you. This is, you need to do your own laundry in your relationship. The two of you need to clean this up, or you need to find someone that you can talk to.
So let me just poke a hole in the you need to.
Yeah.
As a psychologist, I had to break myself this way early on. You need to do that. Well, that puts me up here and you down here, and it translates like you're too stupid to figure this out by yourself. So you need to tell me to tell you what you need to do. And I've never been in your shoes, and I've never been in a relationship with you guys. So who am I to even tell you what you need to do? I don't know what people need to do, but what I have asked and what I have mentored my patients to ask is, honey, I think there's something about me that you find unapproachable or that leads you to not want to talk to me. And I really want to hear what you have to say. And then open the conversation and then be quiet. Because if I'm asking my partner to give me feedback about something that could possibly be hard to hear, and I keep interrupting as they talk to me, then I'm not really listening to their feedback. I am defending myself or justifying why I do what I do. That is not the issue. The issue is I want to know what it is about me that keeps you from talking about money with me. Or tell me how I could approach you in a different way.
Yeah, and then I suppose if you do that a few times and it still isn't working, like, they're not able to, whatever, it might be, at what point do you start thinking about getting out?
Well, that's a great question. How miserable are you? Is this like the overriding problem that you just can't live with? Or is this an irritation? You get to decide. And then if you decide to leave, you get to just figure out how to do it with dignity that preserves your dignity and does not create a feeling of hostility, if this is possible, between you and X. But again, that is a conversation. So I'll make up something. I can't support us as a couple or a family the way this is going. Are you willing to work with me and maybe go to our accountant to make some changes? So if your answer is no, I'm not doing any of that, there's your answer. We don't take no for an answer. We take no as an invitation to argue, because we want to convince the other person why their no isn't valid. As opposed to, okay, you said no, I hear you, I have to make my own plans.
Yeah, it's, I'm thinking of the limerence, which I do want to talk about next. Early on in the relationship, it makes it easy to explain away problems.
We explain away them to ourselves. We have such a good thing going on. If we're really legally together, the dirty underwear that's making me crazy on the bathroom floor will go away. That's the made-up story. Nobody's going to change. And I've said this, and I think this is from Marianne Williams. It's about when people show you who they are, or maybe Maya Angelou. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Nobody's going to change. Maybe chemically, we disregard what is irritating us for the first 6 months.
All right, well, let me ask you about that, because I'm hoping that I'm right and you're wrong, but I doubt that's
me
the
too.
case. So, I've heard a lot, people don't change. Mm-hmm. But I want to believe that they do. And so in my head, I've made this distinction that people's values don't change, but it is possible to change your habits. You can gain knowledge and learn skills and change habits, but if those habits don't align with your values, it's never going to stick. So is that fair to say that values don't change, but habits can?
Well, first of all, I agree with you somewhat. If I change my values to accommodate you, which is codependency, values can change, but then I will have what's called ego dystonia, where it doesn't match who I am as a person, so I'll suffer. But people can change if they want to. But if people don't want to because you're wrong and you're being an SOB and telling me I shouldn't spend so much money, I'm not going to change. It's not about change. It's about an argument. Who's going to win? And if you're telling me what I need to do, boy, those are fighting words. So people can change if they want to. People can change if they have maybe some mentor about what they think their options for change might be. Change is hard. I'll tell you why. because everything we do is hardwired. Everything we do repeatedly is hardwired in the brain. And to get that wiring, to get space so it can develop a new option, we have to practice different behaviors. And that's really hard because we have to be conscious. Think about when you learn to drive. We were really conscious. We pressed the turn on switch, or in my age, we turned the key. And we made sure that the gear was right. And then we always had to make sure the radio was on the correct station, right? And that we were looking so cool. And then we looked in our rear view mirror and we methodically drove because it was scary at first. And now how do we get in the car? Automatically. We don't even think about it. So that's the hardwiring in the brain. And think about what it would be like to be so conscious like you were at 16 when you're driving, as you have habituated yourself now. So it's very much of a challenge to decide that you want to change something. And a lot of stuff that other people say we need to change, we think that's ridiculous, so I'm not changing that. So you might as well bang your head against a wall unless people want to change.
Yeah, it does seem like it takes, we have to want it to an extreme amount in order to put in the work on something that is currently easy. Like my morning routine, it isn't really much of a routine. My morning routine is easy. I just do it automatically. And it would take extra effort. It would take time away from other things that I value for me to be thinking about my morning routine, constantly checking the rear view mirror, the side mirrors, am I in the lane, white knuckling it the way that I did when I first started to drive.
Yes.
But I think that if I were to start by having a sincere desire and seeing the benefit of changing my morning routine, then that might carry me through the white knuckle phase long enough for me to relax a little bit and for my neurons to have a chance to form new connections until my new morning routine becomes the easiest path. And so my brain just wants to do this new, more healthy, more productive morning routine. So I'm kind of talking myself into changing my morning routine while we're talking.
Well, here's another great example. Actually, it's a personal story. So when I stopped smoking, when we smoke cigarettes or pot or whatever we're smoking, mine wasn't pot, we have connections that are in our brain. So you wake up, you have a cigarette. Then you have coffee and another cigarette. And then you might make a phone call and have a cigarette. And then you get in your car to go somewhere and you have a cigarette. And wow, all those connections are so bonded. Automatically, we don't think about it anymore. So when I stopped smoking many moons ago, I had to go like, oh my God, I'm awake. What am I going to do with myself? So I had to create a whole list. And every time I wanted a cigarette, I made myself go outside and walk. Hated that. I was so ticked off. But I had to do it. I had to break these connections. I remember driving without a cigarette and almost falling asleep, because nicotine gives you a little up. And that was scary. So I had to figure out, well, like, what am I going to do to keep myself awake while I'm driving? So I got one of those collapsible cold packs, right hand right on it. Boy, that kept me awake. So we get to, figure out what we're going to do to break habits.
Along lines of habits, I do presentation coaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of my main thing. And when I'm working with someone who uses a lot of fillers, okay, that sort of thing, it's a terrible habit from a presentation standpoint. But what I tell all of them is that it's very difficult to just stop doing something, but it's much easier to replace doing one thing with doing another thing. So for them, it's just, don't think about not saying just replace it with a pause. So if normally you would say, this is what I would say, you instead say, this is what I would say, right? You put a deliberate pause in there. And I think what you're just talking about, you replaced the cigarette with the walk. And it felt wrong and awful or whatever at first, But over time, then your brain wasn't feeling the gap of not having something. It just was a new thing to do. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. And over time, over maybe 6 months, the freedom of not having to think about that was amazing. And I look at smokers today, no matter what they're smoking, and I think, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm free of that. I'm so free of it. And my brain connections went elsewhere. And that's the work that's so hard.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with money, Steve. If I'm used to spending ABC, because on anything that I want, if I watch TV and all the shopping and do online shopping, what am I going to do with myself? What am I going to watch on TV? And how am I going to satisfy whatever it is I'm not satisfying in myself? And that's the deeper question. What is it, in my native example, that keeps me shopping? It's a deeper issue. But if I don't want to look at it or change it, I won't.
You know, I'm glad you said that. And I think it's a great way for us to sort of come back to the beginning here, is that all of our behaviors are driven by emotions. I just the other day learned about this, I think hate, H-A-I-D-T, might have been the author's name or the person's name, but it's the elephant and rider metaphor. That
Okay.
The rational brain is the rider and the emotional brain is the elephant. And usually the rational brain is in control, but when the elephant wants to go someplace and all the rider can do is hang on. And it was about how our emotions drive our behaviors. And if there's an emotional need, we're going to meet that need somehow, not always in the way that we want or you know, that our rational brain would approve of. So my first thing would be, do you think that's a fair analogy? And the second thing would be, what can we do, especially I'm thinking about money and emotional spending, or, you know, satisfying that emotional need in a way that's unhealthy. So do you think that's a valid metaphor? And whether it is or not, what are some things that we can do rationally to prevent our emotional need from driving us towards bad behaviors?
Well, first of all, if you let our emotions, drive your bus, then there's no critical thinking going on. So I feel it, so it must be true. That's a cognitive distortion. So I feel it. I need to research if I'm accurate, because we have people having meltdowns all the time, and because of feelings. But let's get the critical thought in here. So what's coming up for you? What's behind it? Where did you learn it? Tell me about the feelings. And if I let somebody else's emotions drive my bus, boy, I've turned over my emotional health. Because you're sad, oh, I must be sad too. You're upset, oh, I'm going to join you in that. How about, God, I see you're upset. I had a really good day at work. Is there anything I could do to support you? Okay. So I think it has to be a mixture. It cannot be all emotions. They're so not accurate. And they come usually from family of origin issues that have not been resolved. Now, what was your second part of that question?
Just what can we do? What are there systems that we can put in place so that when that emotional need comes up, is there something we could do to help us recognize and maybe divert a pattern that isn't getting us where we want to be?
Yeah, you can stop right in mid-track and think, what am I feeling? What's coming up for me? Is there anything from my past that would be coloring how I am seeing this? And do I need to make an amends to somebody? And what could I do differently?
So one thing that we've mentioned a couple times but haven't really talked about is limerence.
Yes.
For me, it was not only a new concept, but a new word. I just wasn't familiar with the word limerence. Mm-hmm. Although when you described it, I recognized immediately that I'm very familiar with the phenomenon. So what is limerence and how does it impact us?
So limerence, and it's not my idea. There's a book about limerence that was written, I think, in the 30s or 40s. But people, I don't know, people are unfamiliar with it. So limerence is the need to bond. And after I've had my chemical high with somebody, then I really want to make sure they bond with me in a sexual and emotional way. And I work on that. And it takes up all the real estate in my head. Like, oh my God, I got to be with so-and-so. Are they thinking of me? I wonder when I'm going to see him or her next. And this can go on up to 5 years. And then, as I said, just enough time to have a child. And then it's like, oh God, am I stuck with this? We start figuring out what's wrong with this person. And we don't look at it as, how is this not a match and how did I think it was? We look at it like, this person's wrong. They need to change because I'm so right, because what I want rules. And so limerence is a really a bonding time that, you know, the divorce rate in this country is about 50%. And it's usually, I've done research on this, so the 50% of divorced people usually get a divorce during limerence. Or after limerence.
Just afterwards, yeah.
Just afterwards, yeah. So there it is, because we don't know the people that we are deciding to get into a long-term relationship really well. And as I said in my seminar, what do you know about the person that you're about to bond with? You know, lots of people jump in bed and then it's a relationship. But we haven't discussed anything, and we're all in our social masks, because I'm looking really good when I meet you, not when I wake up in the morning, but you'll never see that right now. And the same for the other person. So we wear our social masks and we aren't our authentic selves. And many of us don't even know what our authentic self is. And what that means is, well, my parents thought that, so I think that, as opposed to my parents thought that, and I don't think that, because that doesn't float with me.
Is it fair to say that limerence is a biological tool, biological imperative for bonding and procreation, or that helps, you know, bonding and procreation, but doesn't work for marriage and long-term relationships? Because I think you said it's like 5 years.
Yeah, it can be up to 5 years. It can't be a foundation for a good relationship, a long-term relationship. Just like the chemicals are not a foundation. What is the foundation is, do you and I have like values? Do you and I have like thoughts about raising a child? Do you and I like animals together? Do you and I have a budget, because we'll bring this back to money? Do we have similar spending values? Do you want to save 20% of your salary and I want to save 50%? And do I want to do my shopping online? And you're going to get mad every time you see a package arrive at the door. So again, limerence is not a foundation for a relationship. We don't usually have conversations about it. We usually have complaints, because I am focused on having you stay with me. And I am focused on bonding with you and being in a partnership that is what I think of as solid. So we have to figure out how we're going to have these conversations about values and budgets and responsibilities, and before we decide to get into a long-term relationship. And we don't. Our culture doesn't.
Yeah, you know, I've heard many pundits, or whatever you want to call them, talk about the Hollywood phenomenon where getting together is the end of the movie, right? The two people, they get together and that's the end of the movie, but that's the start of the work of a relationship.
That's the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
And there's been movies, Cinderella this, Cinderella that, and it's all about being rescued. usually by some guy or some woman, if you're a lesbian, or some guy if you're gay. So, and then we live happily ever after. That's the end of the story. That's the Julia Roberts, Pretty Woman,
Yeah.
gosh, rescued. So that is a cultural lie.
Yeah, it absolutely is a cultural lie.
Yeah.
I don't want to, before we end, we're getting close, but I don't want to end without talking a little bit about your books and asking you how folks can contact you and find out more about you. Because you've got several books. You have a whole series of books that I've got one of them, and I found it to be fascinating. And I like the notion of sort of this conscious work that we're putting in, like your book. It's a contract series, right? Can you tell us a little more?
So they're all named Let's Make a Contract with subtitles. So we have Getting Your Teen Through Substance Abuse. I have one about getting your teen past the opioid epidemic, getting your teen through high school, and getting yourself through unhappy romantic relationships. And they're about contracts that you make with each other or you make with your teens. So you know the consequences before you make a decision to do something because they've been talked out. And I've had really great feedback about these books. They work for people. I came up with the idea working with teens and substance abuse and the family problems that causes. And I also teach codependency where I work. So here's the thing. We think the teen's brain should allow the teen to have some wisdom. There is no wisdom in a teen. The brain's not developed enough. So, but we give them responsibilities or think that they should have known something and they did something bad. So then I have to clean up or I have to punish them or give them a consequence after the fact. So I like what I call preemptive parenting, where you and I sit down together, we have a car contract. If you're going to get a car, who does what, who pays for what, who cleans what, who's responsible for speeding tickets. We may or may not sign the contract because I'm the parent in this example, and I get to say what I'm not going to do. But anyway, you know it as a kid, it's my kid, you know it up front. So if you decide to disrespect the contract, then you choose the consequence. It's all up to you. It just takes so much fighting out of it. Now, here's the problem. So many of us parents cave. Oh, you're having a big temper tantrum. You're putting a hole in the sheetrock in the living room wall. So, okay, well, just this once, I'm going to disrespect the contract. And what that teaches our kids or the adults around us is that we are full of hot air, that we will cave if they whine enough. And so if I don't respect what I say, why should they? And we parents get mad at the other person. Same with relationships.
Yeah, it seems to me my parenting philosophy has been, and I like to think I'm pretty good with it, but it's always been clear boundaries and consistent consequences.
Right.
So
up front.
Up front. So this seems to formalize that, and the books address different and difficult scenarios.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like what if you have a teen who doesn't want to stop using?
Yeah, exactly.
What if you're in a relationship with somebody who's stealing from you? That kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that I think that's probably a good place to wrap things up. How can folks contact you if they want to, or where can they find your books? Do you have a website?
Well, I'm on Amazon.
Okay.
And my website is www.Dr. Ann Schiebert, SCHIEBERT.com. That is my entire website, and you can see my radio program that I used to do and past presentations I've made. And the books.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Schiebert. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us, and I'm looking forward to finishing reading your book and learning so much more about all this stuff. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I have a fiction book coming out probably in the summer called The Dumpster Dogs. It's fiction. It's called Wisdom for Humans. So be looking for that. It's a fun book.
Excellent.
Only dogs could review it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate your time and attention as well. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.